Hi, I'm Dorothy. Are you ready to dive deep into one of the bougiest zip codes in the country? The good, the bad, the ups and downs, the real and the not so real. This is That Greenwich Life. First, I'd like to thank our episode sponsors. Jaja Pet by Janet is the stress-free groomer in Greenwich for your precious pups. I take my golden doodle Bleecker there, and he plays with all the other dogs the whole time instead of being locked up in a crate, and he looks and smells amazing when he leaves. The name Zhao Zhao means happy place, and that's what it is. For more info, visit jaujapet.com and at Jaja Pet by Janet on Instagram. We all want glowing skin, and that's why I go to Medical Aesthetics PA Naomi Fisher. She specializes in Morpheus, microneedling, aquagold facials, IPL, and more, and she's teamed up with Dr. Katie's Wellness Insights practice in Darien, so every issue gets treated from the inside out. Book an appointment at wellnessinsights.com and mention That Greenwich Life for 10% off. Hi, everyone. Happy Thursday, and welcome back to That Greenwich Life. My name is Dorothy Cascerceri Simone, and I am your host, and I am so grateful to have you back here. Thank you for tuning in week after week. This week, I want to talk about something that I know we all have in our life. We all have at one point in time or another, whether it has to do with our job or with our family or with our calendar or with our extracurriculars, whatever it may be. One thing that we all have, one thing that we all share, because you know that I'm big on this, are expectations, okay? When was the last time that you had an expectation about something? It doesn't even have to necessarily be that you had a positive expectation about something. Perhaps you were going into a particular day or an event or a task, and your expectation was this is going to be absolutely horrible. Either way, we all have them. And I was thinking about expectations and how it's something that we really need to have a conversation about, because our expectations are really only serving us in a negative way. There's nothing great that comes out of going into anything with having a preconceived notion of how it's going to be. So I want to tell a little story. Just a few weeks ago, I went out to Vail, Colorado. If you are following me on Instagram at Dorothy on TV, I know that you saw plenty of my content. I did all sorts of incredible things out there. Went hiking with llamas, took bikes to the very, very top of Vail Pass at 10,000 feet and biked down. It was such an unbelievable trip. I stayed at the Four Seasons Vail. Discover Vail actually invited me to come out. And, you know, some of you may know this or you may not, but I am a travel writer. I've been a travel writer for over a decade. I took a little bit of time off after I had my son, but I'm back in the saddle now. And I write for several, just freelance for different places, and justlux.com is one of them. And so Discover Vail was so nice to invite me out via their PR firm, Malin Yantis, who they're also amazing. And so they invited me out for this incredible little 3-night getaway, a place that I could go and, you know, discover what Vail is all about in the summertime and really find my Vail moment. So this was a great trip and we did lots of great things. Now I want to talk about the second morning of my trip. I signed up for something called goat yoga. Has anybody listening ever done goat yoga or ever wanted to do goat yoga? So here I am thinking, okay, I'm going to go. These goats are going to be adorable. I've seen pictures before. They stand on people's backs when they're doing plank and, you know, downward dog and things like that. And they're going to be so adorable. And I was missing my baby and I was missing my puppy and I was missing my son. And this is a great chance to kind of be with the goats. So I went into it, you know, it was this gorgeous morning, because the summertime, by the way, in Vail is unbelievably gorgeous. The temperatures are so perfect. It gets nice and warm during the day, but in the morning it's nice and cool. In the night it's cool. If you want to escape that summertime heat, Vail is definitely the place to go. I ran into a bunch of girlfriends who were there on bachelorettes and little spa weekends, and I was thinking about how much fun it would be to have my kids there. So it really kind of goes for anyone. I was there on really a solo trip, like a work trip, a press trip. But anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. So I get myself together. I get in the car to go up to goat yoga at this place, Vale Stables. And I get there and there are so many beautiful horses. It's a gorgeous morning. The sun is shining. The views, it's all the way up on the top of a hill. So the views of all the mountains are just stunning. I can see the gondola in the distance going up and down the mountain. And so anyway, we set up our yoga mats and we are then introduced to the little goats. So the woman that ran the place, Holly, she was so lovely. Like, what a great energy, what a great vibe. I mean, if you're a yoga instructor, you kind of have to have that kind of energy, because if you don't, then I don't know what you're doing as a yoga instructor. But anyway, she opens the little gate, and the little goats, they were all born only about maybe 3 months prior. So they were really young, and they all start like running out of their little pen, and they're so cute with their little horns, and they're tiny. They're only maybe, 15, 18 inches off the ground. They're all pretty tiny, all different colors, gorgeous little animals. And so there's one that's sleepy and had taken some Benadryl for some allergies. So she asks if anybody wants to hold it. And of course I said yes. And so I'm holding this goat and walking over to the yoga mat. And all of a sudden I look down and this goat is shitting everywhere. Like barely missed my white sneakers, barely missed my pants that I was wearing. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is this goat okay? Like, is this goat sick? What's going on here? And I go over and, give the goat back, and then I sit down and she starts the class. And, it's a very interactive class, and the goats are all kind of hanging out. And I feel particularly lucky because several of them are sitting over by me, by my mat. And one little goat, when I'm in one of the poses, I think Warrior One little goat comes over and goes right in between my legs, which are spread out on the mat, standing up. And the goat sits down, a little black and white goat. And the goat sits down, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, this is so sweet. This goat is totally here. Like, this energy is so great. The yoga class is really nice. We're doing lots of stretching. And then I look down, and this goat had crapped all over my mat. I mean, like, really disgusting goat crap. And so I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, okay, this is kind of disgusting. This is not at all what I was thinking was going to happen for goat yoga. What exactly do I do now? And I could tell that I was getting really, really uncomfortable, which we're all human, right? If you're listening right now and you're doing goat yoga and the goat craps like all over your mat and right by all of your things, I'm pretty sure that you're going to join me by feeling a few different things, maybe annoyed, maybe turned off, maybe you want to leave, maybe you never want to do goat yoga again. I don't know what it might be, but I'm going to tell you, in this yoga practice, I was thinking to myself about expectations and how these expectations can oftentimes really deprive us of feeling happiness and joy in a situation, and how our own expectations can really work against us. So these are barnyard animals. Why did I not have the expectation that they are not potty trained? In fact, Holly, the lovely woman who worked there, was so sweet. And she said that they tried to potty train them a few years back on the little pee pads that you use for small dogs. And it was working quite well. And then when they brought them into the area with all the yoga mats, well, they couldn't tell the difference between the little pee pads and the yoga mats. So that didn't work. But anyway, the point is, I started kind of feeling my mind activate. And does this happen for you as well? I know that when we're in situations that are not quite going the way that we want them to, our mind starts activating. Our mind starts having some kind of a response. Even our nervous systems can have some kind of a response. I know that there was one person that was really freaking out about the goats and what was going on. Me personally, I was trying to reframe in my mind, like, okay, take a deep breath. When I took a deep breath, I had some very interesting smells, but I took a deep breath nonetheless. And I said to myself, this is yoga, and yoga is about flow. and yoga is about going with the flow. So there's a chance here to flip out, be really disgusted, exit the yoga area, leave the place entirely, feel like I had wasted my morning, feel like why had I woken up so early to do this? And when I recognized these thoughts in my mind, they weren't active thoughts. They were old ways of thinking. They were the old way that I would have dealt with a situation like this. But the new way, given a very, very difficult, if you're just tuning in for the first time, you know this for the first time, but if you've been with me now throughout the episodes, you know that I went through a very life-transforming period of time where I had a lot of traumatic pregnancy loss. I lost a baby at 21 weeks. I had multiple losses after that and had a really, really hard journey of PTSD and depression on my way to having my daughter, who at the time that I'm recording this is 15 months old. But after that dark night of the soul, I call it, there was kind of this transformation that has happened for me. And so in this yoga class, noticing what was happening in my nervous system and in my mind, I was able to breathe through it, regardless of the smell that I was breathing in. And I was able to find the joy and the beauty in it. The gorgeous sun shining, the beautiful view, the woman who was leading the class, who you could tell just loved these little baby goats so much and had such positive energy. And I really allowed that to really just kind of wash over me in a way. So I want to talk about expectations. And I want to talk about how being flexible in situations is of the utmost importance. And I think that probably in not enough situations, I practice flexibility. And perhaps if you're listening, in many situations, you do not practice flexibility. I think I learned most about flexibility in going through IVF and the many, many rounds that I went through and the many traumas on my body that didn't amount to anything, absolutely nothing. Not only didn't amount to nothing, but I was in the hole. I was in the hole thousands and thousands of dollars from a failed retrieval, from a failed transfer. I was in the hole precious days and moments of my life that I was in the hole, having to do a ton of shots and needles. I was in the hole with not being able to plan certain things to do with my child. My son is 8 years old. At the time, he was young, and we were trying to plan like little family vacations and things like that, and we never could because we never knew when I needed to do my next retrieval and when my next cycle was going to happen. And it was just all very much a deficit that it caused. And so, there's probably, I would say, 4 different types of expectations. And today, I'm not going to talk about all 4, but perhaps in a subsequent episode we can. But there are circumstantial everyday expectations. So you take your shirt to the dry cleaner and your expectation is that you are going to leave it there for 3 days and you're going to pay them a certain amount of money and you're going to pick it up and the button on your shirt is going to be fixed or the stain is going to be removed or whatever it might be. Circumstantial everyday expectations. Now we all know that there have been times that you pick something up at the dry cleaner and none of that has happened. So those types of expectations, the everyday, that's a place where your expectations can be completely wrong. You might expect when you wake up, if you have kids, that your babysitter is going to arrive at 9 a.m. so that you can go and get something done. Or maybe your babysitter is going to arrive at 7 a.m. so that you can leave and go to work. And we all know that those expectations can sometimes end up being the wrong expectations to have because things happen and babysitter gets sick. Or maybe your child gets sick and you have to call out of work. So the point is, we're in kind of like an ever-moving schedule and life and world. And so these expectations alone, at the simplest level, are still expectations that can sometimes be a slippery slope to have. And so we're going to talk about the circumstantial everyday expectations today. Of course, there are the larger life expectations. I expect that by age 30, I'll be married and I'll have 2 kids and I'll live in the suburbs somewhere. And maybe you're 35 and maybe you're not married. Maybe you don't have any kids. Maybe you have a dog and maybe you live in the city. So there are these larger life expectations, which in another show we should definitely get more into. And then expectations we set for ourselves and expectations we set for others, which I will touch on today, but that's just a little bit different. So let's talk about the circumstantial, everyday expectations. Flexibility, I think, is definitely our biggest friend. So flexibility is our biggest tool when it comes to managing the everyday circumstantial expectations. So we have certain ideas about how our day is going to go, about what our schedule consists of. And then when things don't go as planned, when we end up something's canceled or something's rained out, of course, weather plays a big part in our expectations. Now, I'm not talking about if you spend an entire year and $100,000 getting ready to plan your wedding and then it rains, that you shouldn't have the healthy expectation that it might be sunny on your wedding day. But for the smaller things, we have to be really careful. And I find the biggest work that I do with expectations is through the lens of watching what my son does around this concept. Now, like I said, he's 8 years old. So I don't expect him to be entirely flexible or, easygoing about plans changing. Of course, kids get their hopes up about things and then they get extremely disappointed. We're not that far off. Many of us adults, we're not that far off from these children. But I realize in the way that I'm trying to condition my son and help him, give him the proper tools to survive and thrive in this crazy life, I realized that flexibility is so important. And in trying to teach him flexibility, I realize also that I have still a lot to learn in this department, as I'm sure that many of us do. So how exactly do we do this? How exactly do we stay flexible? And how exactly do we manage these ideas, these preconceived notions that we have about plans that we make and things that we hope to do or experience? Number one, let's talk about the stories, okay? So much of the issue of why we get disappointed is the story that we make in our head before something has even happened. How many of you do that? Right? You're going into, someone in here in the studio just raised their hand. So there you go. You're going into any kind of a situation, whether it's some kind of a work conference or perhaps you're trying something for the first time. You're going to play pickleball for the first time, maybe, or maybe your kids are at some kind of a sports tournament, a baseball tournament. And you have this kind of expectation like, okay, it's going to be over by 4 p.m. And at 7 p.m., you're still sitting there and you are 3 hours into just seething anger and resentment about why in God's good name you're still there 3 hours later. And so we have these ideas, and I think we have to stop before we even go into a situation, and we have to say to ourselves, what kind of expectation or story have I created in my mind about what's going to happen today or next week or next month? And how can I take a break from that story? Or how can I reframe that story so that it doesn't paint a picture already in advance of something that hasn't even happened yet? Because it's all about control. You can't control what happens. I couldn't control in Vail the little baby goats having to go to the bathroom all over and not knowing where to go. I mean, I deal with this with my baby. Luckily, she wears a diaper. I kind of wish I brought some of the diapers for the goats. But the point is, you cannot control something that's happening. But what you can control is how your mind is setting that event up. So going into, let's talk about my son's very first Christmas concert at his school, okay? As parents, we have expectations for our kids, just like we have expectations for ourselves. And I went to a couple of the little practices for the Christmas concert. He was only 2 years old at the time. And this is the old me that we're talking about, because back then I was clueless. I didn't do even 75% of the soul work, because I had not yet really encountered the darkest days of my life that then forced me to look into all of this. But I went to all the practices. I watched him shake the bells to jingle bells. It was the absolute cutest thing. I couldn't wait for the morning of the performance. I have a background as a performer. As some of you may know, I have made a career of talking. Surprise, surprise. If you're listening to this podcast, thank you for supporting my career. But I've made a career out of talking, out of being on television, radio, having a voice, sharing my voice, and performing for millions and millions of eyeballs and people. So when it came time for my son to perform in his very first show, all the practices were looking pretty good. Rehearsals were looking great. And so I put on my little Christmas sweater with my little blinking Christmas lights and hit the power button and walked into that church at the time, all excited to watch this adorable concert. And my son, for whatever reason, I definitely worried about this at the time. You know, if you're my child, you can't have stage fright. But at the time, my son had an absolute meltdown. He started crying. He laid down on the ground. He hid behind one of the teachers on the stage. He would not perform. And by the way, it started out really great. It started out going completely along with the story that I had created in my mind, with the expectations that I had for how this concert would play out. He started out right in the front, smack in the middle, right by the microphone, exactly where mommy would have been at that age and exactly where mommy would be now. But it slowly deteriorated and it got worse and worse. And all the other parents are taking pictures of their kids, all happy with big smiles on their face, singing jingle bells at the top of their lungs. And my son is kicking his legs over in the corner off the stage, having a full meltdown, no interest in performing. And I was devastated. I cannot even tell you, I'm actually ashamed to even say it, but I was devastated. I was so disappointed that this glorious Christmas concert that I was all geared up to go watch and go see and be so proud of my son, and I had all these ideas and all these stories about, didn't go the way that I had planned. And I'm sad for her. We'll call her because she's a past version of me. But I'm sad for her that she wasn't able to see the humor in it, the irony in it, that she wasn't able to notice that there was something going on for him that made him uncomfortable, and this was his way of dealing with it, and it was completely healthy and normal. I'm sad for her that she wasn't able to give any grace to that situation. And I know, because I've talked to so many other parents, I know that we've all been in this boat at one time or another with our kids not necessarily doing, you know, what we set out and what we expect. And so looking back on that, when I went to goat yoga in Vail, I felt this pride and reflection wash over me that, wow, I had really come a long way, because we're talking about something so much harder to deal with than your child not performing. We're talking about animal feces close to my white sneakers, my bag, my cell phone, and literally right below where I'm standing. And yet it really just didn't faze me. And I think it's from a few years of retraining my mind and retraining my nervous system to find the humor and to find the funny story and to realize that it's okay. It's not going to be a big deal. In fact, the one goat, after it did its thing on my mat, it got up, and as it was walking away, it had green stuff dripping all down its leg, and it was tracking it everywhere. And I said to the woman, by the way, the goat has green stuff. And she said, no worries, I'll clean it in a little bit. Remember, they're barnyard animals. And so I wanted to share this episode with you, because I do think that we all have room for improvement. Certainly I do. In these stories that we create in our head, stopping these stories, and eliminating these stories altogether and just going into things and letting them unfold as they may in real time. The thing about expectations is that sometimes when we've been hurt enough and when we feel that life has failed us enough, we end up having the opposite expectation. We don't go into goat yoga thinking it's going to be some glorious thing. We don't go into anything really that we do thinking it's going to be glorious. We go into it thinking like, what's going to go wrong here? What's going to happen here? And that's not necessarily healthy, but sometimes things turn out even better than we expect. And I know that certainly through all the years that I went through this very difficult fertility journey, I know that things turned out even better than I expected with the birth of my beautiful daughter, Gemma, who is 15 months old. And every single day that I look at her, I realize that having that negative expectation, the absolute polar opposite ended up happening. So, but how much time did I waste like having the negative expectation? I just wasted a lot of time. I wasted a lot of energy. So for our weekly work on, because as you know, each episode, you have your weekly workout, you have your daily workout that helps your body stay healthy. This is your weekly work on, which helps your mind stay healthy and helps your life stay in balance. And for your weekly work on this week, I'm going to invite you that when something is going totally sideways, whether it's something small in your day-to-day, if you can even just do this once throughout the week, when something's going the opposite of the way that you expected it to, I invite you to return to your breath, to take a deep breath. Hopefully you won't be smelling the same things that I did during goat yoga, but I invite you to take a deep breath and let go and surrender to how the situation is unfolding. It may not be the way that you expected it. It may not be the story that you came up with in your mind, but try it and see what happens. I invite you to follow me at Dorothy on TV on Instagram and share with me a little bit about how this experience went. If you do it once throughout the week and you liked it, try it a second time, try it a third time even. I'm going to be trying it too. And this is also something really great that you can help your kids with. I know at the end of my son's school year, the school had this really fun event set up, and it was a whole obstacle course with all these flags and things. And I went, and my son was so unhappy for the first 15 to 20 minutes of this, which I couldn't believe. And he thought it was going to be something other than it was. And I said to him, you have to let go of the story that you created, and you have to be in the present moment right now, today, Tuesday, 1 p.m., and you have to really try to focus on what's unfolding at this moment. Because whatever you thought it was going to be, that ship has sailed, that's gone. So now try looking at what it is. And I had to leave to go put the baby down for her nap, so I didn't have a chance to see how it unfolded. But he came home that day on the bus, running into the door to tell me how much fun it ended up being, what a great time he had. He can't wait to do it again. He might want to do this for his next birthday party. And I thought to myself, you know what? That was easy for me to explain to him, but I have to put that practice into my own life. So I'm going to be joining you for the weekly work on. I invite you to follow me at DorothyOnTV.com. And thank you so much for tuning in this week. Thank you for listening. Please review the show, leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Please give us some stars, drop it into a group chat, share it with anybody you come across, your hairdresser, your bus driver, your best friend, anybody you think would benefit from this. And catch us wherever you enjoy your podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify. And thank you so much to Pod Populi Studios for hosting me in the Greenwich, Connecticut studio. They take all the hard parts out of podcasting so I can have fun with it. And thank you so much to my sponsors for this episode, Zhao Pet by Janet in Greenwich and Medical Aesthetics PA Naomi Fisher. And I can't wait to see you next week. Remember, don't just live your life, love it.